Day 1, the silver mist. Elias didn't believe in the local warnings. He just wanted to reach the Blackwood Ridge before sunset to set up his landscape shots. As the canopy thickened, the air turned unnaturally cold. By 4 p.m., a silver mist rolled in, swallowing the trail. He wasn't alone. 3 figures stood in a triangle around his path. They weren't wearing hiking gear. They wore heavy, outdated wool coats that seemed untouched by the damp air. Their skin was the color of unpolished marble. "You're off the path, traveler," the tallest one said. His voice sounded like grinding stones. Elias froze. As he adjusted his camera, the lens caught their eyes. They didn't reflect light. They seemed to drink it. The one to his left moved with a speed that defied physics, appearing inches from his shoulder. He smelled of old parchment and ozone. "We don't get many visitors who carry their own light," the woman whispered, nodding toward his flashlight. She didn't blink. Not once. They didn't attack. They simply watched him, with a terrifying, patient hunger. "Sleep light, Elias," the tall one said, knowing his name without being told. "The forest is small tonight." Day 2, the crimson dawn. Elias didn't sleep. He spent the night inside a circle of salt and burning mountain ash, his back against an ancient oak. Every time his flashlight flickered, he saw flashes of pale faces in the trees, just out of range, circling like sharks in deep water. When the first gray light of dawn broke, the pressure in the air vanished. He scrambled back toward the trailhead, his heart hammering against his ribs. He reached his car just as the sun cleared the horizon. Panting, he threw his gear into the passenger seat and looked in the rearview mirror. Written in the frost on his back window was a single sentence. "You forgot your lens cap." Sitting on the trunk of his car was the plastic cap he'd dropped miles back in the deep woods. It was bone dry despite the morning dew. Looking back at the tree line, he saw 3 shadows standing perfectly still at the edge of the shade, watching him drive away into the safety of the day. Day 3. The unseen passenger. Elias reached the small town of Oakhaven by noon, desperate for the mundane noise of a diner. He sat by the window, his hands still shaking as he stirred his coffee. He kept glancing at the red bakkie parked outside. It looked normal, but the memory of that bone-dry lens cap haunted him. As he began editing his photos on his laptop, he found a file he didn't remember recording. It was a 3-second video clip from the previous night. In the pitch black, a pair of pale, slender hands reached out from the darkness and gently adjusted the collar of his jacket while he slept. He didn't finish his meal. He drove for hours heading toward the coast, but the air inside the bakkie began to change. It grew heavy and sweet, smelling of crushed lilies. Every time he looked in the rearview mirror, he caught a glimpse of a shadow in the bed of the truck, tucked under the tarp with his gear. When he pulled over to check, there was nothing, only his bags, neatly rearranged into a pattern that looked like a bird in flight. He realized then they hadn't let him go. They had just moved the hunt into the sunlight. Day 4, the invitation. By the 4th day, Elias was exhausted. He had checked into a motel, but when he woke up, his car keys were missing from the nightstand. He found them hanging from the backie's ignition. On the passenger seat sat an old, hand-drawn map of the very forest he had fled. A small X was marked deep in the center, near a hidden spring. Next to the map was a single, fresh pomegranate, vibrant red and split open. He tried to drive in the opposite direction, but the backie's engine would sputter and die every time he turned south. When he turned north, toward the forest, it purred like a predator. At dusk, he found himself back at the trailhead. The silver mist was already waiting, spilling out onto the asphalt like a welcoming carpet. The tall man from the first day was leaning against a tree, holding Elias's missing tripod. "You have a gift for seeing the world?" "Elias," the vampire said, his eyes glowing with a faint amber hue. "But you've only seen the surface. We've decided you're the one to document what happens after the sun stays down." Elias looked at his camera, then at the darkening woods. He realized he wasn't afraid anymore. He was curious. He picked up his bag and stepped out of the bakkie, leaving the door open. He didn't need the car where he was going. Day 5, the Glass Lake. Elias no longer felt like a captive. He felt like a ghost walking among gods, guided by the woman with the marble skin, whose name, he learned, was Kaya. He was led to a part of the forest that appeared on no map. They reached a lake so still it looked like polished black glass. "Capture this," Kaya whispered, standing at the water's edge. As Elias looked through his viewfinder, the world transformed. The camera lens, perhaps influenced by the forest's energy, stripped away the illusion of the night. In the reflection of the water, he didn't see trees. He saw towering cathedrals of bone and frozen light. The vampires weren't just standing there. They were dancing, but at a speed the human eye couldn't track. On film, however, they appeared as streaks of silver ribbon, weaving a physical tapestry of motion around the lake. He captured a shot of the tall man holding a spark of raw starlight between his fingers. It was the most beautiful, terrifying thing Elias had ever seen. He realized they weren't monsters of the dark. They were the architects of it. Day 6, the transition. By the 6th day, the physical toll of the forest began to show. Elias's skin had grown pale, and the food he brought tasted like ash. He spent the afternoon sitting in a hollowed-out stone circle, documenting the feeding. It wasn't what he expected. There was no blood, no violence. Instead, the vampires gathered around an ancient glowing vine that bled a thick, luminescent sap. They offered a cup of it to Elias. "To see the eternal, you must leave the temporary," the tall man told him. Elias took his final human photograph, a self-portrait. In the small digital screen, he saw his own reflection starting to blur at the edges, his pupils expanding until the iris was gone. He looked at the red backy, visible in the far distance through a break in the trees. It looked like a toy, a relic of a life that felt 1,000 years old. He drank the sap. The shutter of his camera clicked one last time, capturing a burst of white light that seemed to swallow the frame. When the image processed, the forest was gone, replaced by a landscape of colors that don't exist in the human spectrum. He dropped the camera. He didn't need the lens to see anymore. Day 7, the final frame. The camera lay in the moss, its battery long dead, but the last image saved to the memory card was an impossibility. It wasn't a picture of the forest or the vampires. It was a photo of time itself, a swirling vortex of gold and violet threads where the past and future collided. Elias stood up, but he no longer felt the weight of his boots or the chill of the morning air. He looked at his hands. They were translucent, humming with the same silver mist that had greeted him on day 1. He turned to the tall man and Kaya. They weren't monsters anymore. They were his kin. "The world is so loud," Elias whispered, his voice now vibrating with that same grinding stone quality. "It is," Kaya replied, handing him a new kind of lens, a shard of obsidian that allowed him to see the heartbeats of creatures miles away. But the silence here is infinite. The epilogue, the discovery. Weeks later, a park ranger found the red backy. It was covered in thick vines, as if the forest had tried to claim it. On the driver's seat sat Elias's camera. When the authorities developed the digital files, they found 999 corrupted images of pure blackness. But the very last photo, the 1,000th frame, stopped the heart of every person who saw it. It was a high-resolution shot of the ranger himself, taken from the perspective of the trees, dated 3 days into the future. Elias was still there. He was just waiting for the right light.